Welcome to episode 3 of Talkin' Tunes with Dr. Tony. What a difference a week makes. Last Saturday, when I recorded episode 2, it was around 20 degrees here in North Georgia. Today, it's around 60 degrees, so I'm dressed accordingly. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas, and I wanted to wish you all a happy New Year's Eve morning, at least for me. We still have leftovers around the house here, and so I'm trying to drop a few pounds. It's very difficult to stay on track with your eating habits when you have all of these tempting foods around here, but we're pretty much down to the last remains of them, so hopefully I'll be over that and start the new year with more clean eating. So I wanted to welcome all the new visitors here. I sent out a few invitations to some of the people that I've met through Discogs, either that I've sold records to or I recently have purchased some CDs. So as a reminder, the process I use to select the recordings to discuss is a random number generator. And each week I pick 4 recordings at random, so I never know what's going to be coming up in the selections that I pick from my music library. This week was particularly interesting because all 4 selections that I picked were not that familiar to me. So I spent quite a bit of time this week listening to these recordings and increasing my familiarity with them. You may be wondering, how likely is it that the random number generator will pick an artist that you're familiar with? Well, the more inventory I have of a particular artist, the greater the probability will be that that artist will be selected. So to give you some insights about the situation, I'll be sharing some statistics about my music library with you next time on episode 4. So stay tuned. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. So the first recording is entitled Automatic Man by the band Automatic Man. I'd be very surprised if you're familiar with this recording. I was not familiar with it until a few months ago when I was browsing through the bins at my local used record store, and I found this recording. And I picked it because I love the cover and also the fact that Michael Shreve, the original drummer from Santana, was a band member. You may remember him from the 1970 Woodstock concert film in his performance of Soul Sacrifice. Automatic Man was a 4-piece group with 3 of the members, Pat Thrall, Donnie Harvey, and Michael Shreve, coming from Stomu Yamashita's Go project, which also included Steve Winwood. The keyboard prodigy Todd Cochran, known also as Bayete, joined these 3, and Automatic Man was formed in 1976. So critics describe their music as space music, psychedelic, prog rock, and funk. There's also some R&B and funk bass, reminiscent of what you hear when you watch a Seinfeld episode. My opinion is that Automatic Man sounds similar to the early Journey albums, started by former Santana alumni Greg Raleigh and Neil Schon. And also they sound somewhat like Captain Beyond. Bayete handles most of the vocals and the songwriting, and to me, he sounds somewhat like Arthur Lee from Love. Their music features clavinet and synthesizer and sound effects, hence the Space Music label. Even though Automatic Man was San Francisco Bay based, they recorded this album in London on Island Records. A single, My Pearl, reached 97 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the album itself reached 75. The songs are a mashup of many different styles, which works against Automatic Man having an identifiable sound. The band released one more album in 1977 called The Visitor. This album was less proggy and did not receive as much critical acclaim. Michael Shreve and the bass player Donnie Harvey moved on after the first album. Interestingly, the 2 remaining members had pretty successful careers after Automatic Man. Baete played on the second Peter Gabriel album and with Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and is still active. And the guitar player, Pat Thrall, played with Meatloaf, Jack Bruce, and on the song Boom Boom, Out Goes the Lights by Pat Travers. Both are currently active. Automatic Man was a bit late coming to the party considering that punk rock gained traction the following year. There are no selections to listen to on Spotify, but if you want to listen to the first album, it's available on YouTube as I record this video. Well, let's move on to the next recording. It's One More Song by Randy Meisner. This is Randy's second album, coming out in 1980. It reached number 50 on the Billboard 200, and two singles pulled from the album, Deep Inside My Heart, featuring Kim Carnes, reached number 22, and Heart of Fire reached number 19. The songs were primarily written by Meisner, Eric Kaz, and Wendy Waldman. Two songs were written by Jack Tempchin, known for penning Peaceful Easy Feeling and Slow Dancin', Swaying to the Music. He also co-wrote Already Gone and wrote You Belong to the City with Glenn Frey. There's also a cover on the album of Anyway Bye Bye, written by Richie Furay from the second Poco album, which has a killer organ solo. Before talking specifically about the album One More Song, I need to share some information with you and my thoughts about Randy Meisner. First, about his career. Although he played on the first Poco album, his presence was eliminated to a large extent, as his picture on the album cover was replaced by a picture of a dog, and his vocals were reported to be erased. Randy then joined Rick Nelson's Stone Canyon Band and backed Linda Ronstadt along with Glenn Frey, Bernie Leadon, and Don Henley, soon forming the Eagles. Randy played on the first 5 Eagles albums and was a major contributor, both from a writing and singing perspective, on Certain Kind of Fool from Desperado, Is It True, and Midnight Flyer from On the Border, my favorite Eagles album, and Take It to the Limit from One of These Nights. Randy's contributions were always top-notch, as he only had a few opportunities given the democratic nature of the Eagles' early band. Although he may have had a suitcase of songs, the Eagles only accepted his very best. Randy left the Eagles for personal and health reasons, which was a real shame. I much prefer the Eagles with Bernie Leadon and Randy Meisner than the Eagles with Joe Walsh and Timothy B. Schmidt. So, about the album One More Song. There's not a bad cut on the album, but there isn't anything that approaches Randy's contributions to the Eagles. But still, it's fine in its own right and will become a favorite with increased listens. The harmonies, while present, are not as good as what you'll find on the Eagles albums. Randy released 5 albums after leaving the Eagles. It's sad that he forfeited millions of dollars in royalties and touring fees, but gained peace of mind. Interestingly, he is not credited on the album at all, but is believed to play just acoustic guitar, which can be found on a YouTube video. Next up, it's Sunset Boulevard. It's more likely that you know about the 1950 movie directed by Billy Wilder, starring Gloria Swanson and William Holden, than you know about the 1993 musical written and produced by Andrew Lloyd Webber. The story revolves around the faded star of the silver screen silent movies, Norma Desmond, living in the past in her decaying mansion in Los Angeles, and Joe Gillis, a young screenwriter she meets and pretty much holds prisoner, hoping that Joe represents an opportunity for Norma to make a return to the big screen. The musical opened in London in 1993 and later opened in Los Angeles in the same year, later making an appearance on Broadway in 1994. The backstory is that there were many thoughts of making Sunset Boulevard a musical from its inception in 1950 to 1991. Patti LuPone of Evita fame played Norma Desmond in the London production, and Glenn Close played the role in Los Angeles. It enjoyed several long runs in other venues. Unlike Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, Cats, and The Phantom of the Opera, there's never been a movie version of the musical, although Glenn Close was discussing the probabilities or possibilities as recent as 2021. Since there's no movie version, the only way you can know the music of Sunset Boulevard is by watching the musical in person or listening to the soundtrack, which is the case for me. So Sunset Boulevard is classic Andrew Lloyd Webber in terms of having talk singing and a lot of dialogue on the soundtrack. It's an easy to follow story in 2 acts, and the typical musical structure is similar to Evita. Sunset Boulevard won Tonys in 1995 for Best Musical and Glenn Close for Best Female Performance in a Musical. Andrew Lloyd Webber has slowed down in recent years, only making School of Rock and Cinderella during the past few years. But if you like his productions in general, give Sunset Boulevard a try. The last album for this episode comes from the longest current discography I know of, spanning 59 years. The artist I'm talking about is none other than Bob Dylan, and the record is New Morning. New Morning is Bob's 11th album out of 39 studio albums. Coming just 4 months after the critical failure Self-Portrait, New Morning was a critical and commercial success and considered a return to form along the lines of John Wesley Harding from 1967, which featured Along the Watchtower and I'll Be Your Baby Tonight, and Nashville Skyline from 1969, which featured Lay Lady Lay and Tonight I'll Be Staying Here With You. Noel Coppage from Stereo Review said it was Dylan's best album and without any flaws. Other critics praised it for the diversity of styles. New Morning is a gold record and reached number 7 on the Billboard 200 and number 1 in the UK albums chart. The personnel includes David Bromberg on electric guitar and dobro, Harvey Brooks and Charlie Daniels on bass, Russ Kunkel on drums, and Al Cooper on keyboards. Dylan is in fine form on all the tracks. He plays piano on a few cuts. The record opens with If Not For You, a big song for Bob Dylan and George Harrison on All Things Must Pass. Other standouts are Days of the Locust, If Dogs Run Free, a jazz song with Maritha Stewart on vocal and Al Cooper on excellent piano, New Morning, very accessible, and Father of Night, Dylan's interpretation of a Jewish prayer. The Sign on the Window is a great gospel tune, and One More Weekend is great blues. You'd have to wait until Blood on the Tracks from 1975, my favorite Dylan album, and Street Legal from 1978, to hear a collection of songs as strong as New Morning. If you aren't familiar with it, check it out. Well, that's all I have for you today. Please post comments and hit like if you are enjoying these episodes. And of course, subscribe. So I want to wish you all a Happy New Year, and I'll see you again in 2022.